For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. We're rocking and rolling episode 67. Thanks for tuning in yet again. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you're subscribed. That way you get the latest episodes downloaded automatically. Really helps our podcast to grow the more subscribers we have. So if you're trying to help us out, something simple you can do right there. All right, today's episode is brought to you by a brand new partner here for Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Super excited to have Fischel Paddles on the team. They are the makers of fine, handcrafted wooden canoe paddles. Greg Fischel is the man behind the magic with Fischel Paddles. He hand makes each and every canoe paddle at his shop in Flagstaff, Arizona from a single piece of wood. What I love most is the feel and the shape of the Fischel paddles. I use one on every trip that I go on, and I outfit all of the guided trips that I run with Fischel canoe paddles as well. So go check them out right now at FischelPaddles.com. That's F-I-S-H-E-L-L, FischelPaddles.com. Tell them Will sent you and use the code WILL at checkout for a free paddle hanger with purchase of your new canoe paddle. That's code WILL at FischelPaddles.com for a free canoe paddle hanger. And let me tell you, those paddles are awesome. I'm super pumped to have Greg Fischel and Fischel Paddles as part of the Buffalo Roamer Outdoors team. Also, this episode is brought to you by Camp Manitouish YMCA up in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. For over 100 years, Camp Manitouish has been developing character and teaching leadership to kids of all ages up in beautiful Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. It's a 3-week sleepaway camp, so go sign up your child or go sign up for a summer job up at Camp Manitouish YMCA in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. The website there, manito-wish.org. That's manitouish.org, or just Google Camp Manitouish YMCA and tell me you heard about it on this podcast. Okay, without further ado, episode 67, Paul Fuzinski. Paul is a great guy. He runs the podcast Aptitude Outdoors, so you can go listen to him on his own podcast there. Really enjoyed our discussion, so without further ado, let's get to it. Episode 67, Paul Fuzinski on Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Paul, super excited to talk to you, man. I don't know a ton about you, so I'm interested in picking your brain and talking a little outdoors, hunting, fishing, adventure, and with a fellow podcaster. So welcome, man. First off, why don't you tell me a little bit about your podcast, Aptitude Outdoors.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really excited. Fellow adventurers are hard to find, so the internet has been a great tool for that. So my podcast started by accident. I started it in, what year is this? I don't even know anymore. 23, about 2020. And I had actually a business. I was doing a lot of video work for them, and they're like, hey, what would it take to start a podcast? I was like, give me a week. And I started this podcast, and here I am. And,
awesome.
I've always been into the outdoors stuff. I through hike the Appalachian Trail, and I've done a lot of just outdoors stuff generically, camping before that. And then now it's really all focused on, now the podcast is focused on conservation, hunting, fishing, getting like people more into the consumptive side of the outdoors. Because it was really a hard thing for me after through hiking the Appalachian Trail. I was like, there's got to be something more than like just backpacking all the time. And I got really interested in like food and environmental issues. And it all kind of came full circle. And now I just live and breathe hunting and fishing. And I love it.
That's awesome,
doing
man.
it, and that's all I talk about.
I love it too. And I love that transition because I distinctively remember when it happened for me as well. I didn't grow up hunting. I did grow up fishing, but didn't grow up with a hunting family or anything. And I'm still not a big hunter, but I like to get out when I can and try, and mostly it's like waterfowl around here for me. But I'd love to get into some deer hunting. I never have. But when the switch flipped for me was like, like you said, I've been doing all this awesome trips, canoeing, kayaking, backpacking, my whole life, like my whole youth really. And then when I realized, like, I went duck hunting in Montana, and it wasn't anything like special. It was just like my buddy and I took a canoe out, and we like jumped a couple, and we were like stood on an island and had some decoys out and just waited for a while. It was like super bad and lame and not super successful, but like understanding the difference of being a part of the environment and a part of the wilderness versus just traveling through it. Like that's when it switched for me. I was like, holy cow, like if I just sit here perfectly still and pretend like I'm not here, the woods come alive around you. And it's just a completely different perspective than through hiking the AT or even like canoeing the Mississippi River, which is what I've done. Yeah. And it's a really neat experience to have in the woods, I think.
Yeah, there's something to be said for all of it. I think everybody should have some sort of experience outdoors for an extended period of time, like any sort of long distance, anything. It doesn't have to be thousands and thousands of miles like the stuff you and I've done, but even like a week or two, or like there's that gap between maybe getting out of school and going and working a full-time job, maybe just take a month off and just go explore somewhere and really understand nature, because like you're not going to get that always. And you're going to spend a lot of time indoors, no matter what your job is, unless you're doing construction or something, but you're still going to do a lot of in the city, in neighborhoods. And that wilderness experience like really changes people. It doesn't matter who they are. I've never taken anyone out in the woods for an extended period of time and they've been like, yeah, I really hated that. Maybe one person.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not for everyone.
I know. No, I know. I 10,000% agree. Yeah. It's like, everybody that I take out there, and, it's a cliche, but I say it all the time on the podcast, but you always go thinking it's going to be about the woods or about, the hunt or about the mountains, but it's always the people, man. It always comes back to the people and the story and the interactions you have with people along the way. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've, all of my friends I've made over the last probably 5 to 8 years, all we do is outdoor stuff now. And it's really cool. Where I'm out in Northwest Ohio in the Midwest is we're not really known for a lot of the stuff that people out West get to do. Like fly fishing isn't big where I'm at. And, long distance stuff, backpacking, there's not a lot of opportunity to do that directly where I'm at. There's a lot of fishing and a lot of, deer hunting and stuff and waterfowl hunting. But I don't know. And you've probably felt this way too. When you do some big long trip, you kind of feel lost for a while. And then you're like, well, do I move somewhere like Colorado, or do I move somewhere like where everything's outdoorsy all the time? Or do I try and turn the place I live into something that people can enjoy too? And I've always found that it's way easier to just jump ship and go somewhere cool than it is to try and like make a change where you live. And I'm just trying to do that now. I'm trying to get people hyped up to just be able to enjoy this area, because not everybody can afford to move to the mountains. We got cornfields, but we have a hell of a time making it work.
Totally, man. I again, 10,000% agree. It's, I did exactly what you said. I, ran through that whole transgression. Yeah. I went on a big trip, canoed the Mississippi River. I was living in South Dakota at the time and jumped shipped after that, left the job, went to Montana, lived in Montana for like, I think 2 years or so. Worked at a fly fishing shop, and that was the best job I had. A bunch of other odd, terrible jobs to get by. But and now I've been back here in Northern Illinois, which is where I live and where I'm from, and I manage our pig farm here, and
Sweet.
It's totally that same thing where, out west, and I went to school in Colorado too, and I was super amped on it when I was there. But out west, it's like, you go hiking in the Flatirons or, somewhere around Bozeman, you go to the brewery in Bozeman. It's like you're sitting next to like an ultra athlete who like, anything you can do compared to that is like so poo-pooed, it's like, oh, I went and, did a 5-mile hike. Like, oh, well, I did 25 today. And it's just so pretentious, but the Midwest is not like that at all, man. And it's so underexplored. Here in Illinois, we have so many rivers. I'd love to canoe and paddle and kayak and fish. And we have so many rivers that nobody even appreciates, goes on, explores. Like when I tell people like the miles of rivers that we have around us, it's just like free reign. You rarely ever see anybody out there. And there's so much, I found at least that like metaphorically, like there's so much more space here in the Midwest to like explore and find what you want rather than trying to be the biggest, baddest mountain climber or something,
Yeah, and I had that same sentiment. I got home and, the big thing after doing a through hike of the AT is like, oh, I'm going to get the Triple Crown and I'm going to do this. And like, I don't know. I thought that maybe for a little bit. I was like, it was expensive. I don't have anything to prove. Like, I did what I wanted to do and it was fun. I learned what I wanted to learn and I got out of it what I got out of it. And then back to my initial point of like exploring where you're at. There's a river here, the Maumee River, which is one of the hottest walleye fishing spots anywhere on earth. I mean, the walleye run is happening right now. If you were to drive 10 miles down the road from me, there would be dudes elbow to elbow in the river wade fishing for walleye. And
I liked all of that other than the elbow to elbow.
Yeah, that's why I'm not out there. And I like my nature to have a little bit of solitude. I know it's not always like that, but this river is surrounded on all sides by agriculture. We live in Ohio, which is one of the biggest agriculture states in the U.S., and we're surrounded by farms. The majority of the river, it's one of the biggest watersheds. I think it's the biggest watershed to Lake Erie that exists, especially in Ohio. And I got home and I was like, I'm going to kayak this whole river. It's like 135 miles, which, I mean, you've done long distance. That's not that far in a kayak or a canoe. You move a lot faster than walking.
Yeah.
And it was not easy. They just had designated it a water trail, but the logistics were bad. It was not set up to do it. We had to do all those miles in 4 days because there were no access. Like there's no camp.
It's a lot.
Yes. It was like 40 something on average, like 35, 40 a day.
That was big days.
And we had to like call and get permissions on campgrounds that are like city parks that aren't campgrounds. And logistically it was a nightmare, but we kind of wanted to do it unsupported just to have a ball. And like, I don't know, at the end of the day, I would prove that you could do it. It was a little sketchy. There was a couple of dams. There's defunct dams that wasn't really easy to read map-wise because there's not any traditional maps. We were just going off GPS maps of like Google Earth and stitching stuff together. And luckily, the people I went with were kayak instructors locally. And I was like, let's just do this. And it turned out being one of the most fun trips ever. It was brutal. It was nasty, but we proved it was done. And the newspaper wrote this whole thing about it. I'm like, anyone could do this. Anyone. You don't have to go to the Mississippi. That's badass, but you could do it right here.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm all about it.
Me too. And I have a similar want. I want to paddle there's two local rivers here that I like, the Kishwaukee River and the Rock River. And I'd love to paddle all of them. Actually, I'm reading a really interesting book right now. It's so cool, at least that I think, about one of the Native American tribes that was right here on the Rock River, like a stone's throw from where I live. And hearing him talk about all the villages that were in the area and like why a lot of the area has their, like names of towns and names of creeks and stuff. It's the autobiography of Black Hawk, famous war chief.
Sweet.
And he's got monuments all over, and like name, I guess, the way we'd say it now is name drops. He's got name drops all over. And yeah, he grew up right down the road from me, and or right down the river, I should say. And yeah, it's been fascinating reading that, and reading about it. And I'd love to do a canoe of the Rock River as well. Also interesting, and has me thinking, right before we talked, I was just having a conversation with this paddling group called the Illinois Paddling Council. I just connected with them because I'd connected with a couple different groups, backcountry hunters and anglers also, as well as this group, because in Illinois here, I don't know how it works in Ohio, but in Illinois, our water laws are ass backwards, and it's all private. So basically the only public waters are the major navigable waters that were labeled that way in like the mid 1800s that could take like large freight. So the Mississippi is public, the Illinois is public, and like Lake Michigan. But outside of that, all water is public, or is private, I should say. But people have no idea. It's like there's all kinds of people who kayak and canoe. It's just an issue that's never been pressed by like the private landowners. They've always just like let people canoe and kayak, so it's never been an issue. But there's been a couple things that are starting to bubble up, and this organization that I'm kind of helping with, hopefully to try and change those water laws. But yeah, interesting. What are the water laws like in Ohio? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so I actually just learned this recently. They're weird. So and I might be a little off on this. I don't know it verbatim, but it's essentially, as long as you're not anchored, you're on the water itself is public. The water, if you're not touching the bottom, the water is public. But as soon as you step out and the land on either side is private, that you're touching private land on the bottom of the riverbed. And I've never had the issue pressed, especially with the Maumee River. It's a very wide river, essentially, but by the time you get past into the area where I live, it starts out kind of small and narrow, and it's going through a lot of cornfields, and nobody's really out there looking because we're the only people we saw for 4 days on the river at all. So it wasn't like a big deal. But yeah, it is strange, and water laws are just like a whole topic in and of themselves. The way we do water state to state is just weird.
Yeah.
And I 100% believe it should be a public resource, even the bed of the river. Like, I think like that would be so amazing nationwide if all rivers were just like public use.
I agree. I think it should be. So I've lived now in 3 states where they're all different, or 4 states actually. So the most interesting ones are Colorado is the same way. And of course I've just come across this because I'm an angler, right? I love to fish and to canoe and kayak. So Colorado is the same as you mentioned, is that the water is public, but the land below it is not. So yeah, you can't drop an anchor. You can't get out and go on the shore to take a leak. So if you enter at a public spot, you can float through private land. I think they're trying to change it, but yeah, same thing as what it sounds like is Ohio. On the other side of the spectrum is Montana, which is one of the reasons why Montana is such, obviously the topography and the game and fish are massive, but they have great laws to access it and lots of public land. The Montana laws are water, and like the stream bed, the riverbed is public up to I don't know if it's historical or average high water mark. So anything below like, 100-year flood basically, or like a 20-year flood maybe, is public. So yeah, you can walk the riverbed, you can walk the trail along the, along the side of it, along the bank, all public, which is just great.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Well, it's like the one state where there's not that many people either. So they probably don't have a lot of people overuse issues unless it's like certain specific heavily hit fly fishing streams and stuff like that. And yeah, and it's just wild how it changes state to state. Most people probably don't even think of it, but it's something that I think about a lot. And it's funny. I don't know. I was talking to a lot of people and friends and just people I've met through the podcast about hunting and fishing, because that's like all I care about. And we're talking about how I always feel like an idiot because I'm like, dude, I have very low success rates hunting where I live. And apparently it's a pretty difficult place to hunt.
Sure.
Not so much fish. And I didn't realize it until I went to Texas like last week. And it was like a managed stocked pond. And I've been like busting my ass trying to catch like big bass all last summer. I put in some serious hours and I caught a few. And then I go to this pond in Texas and I'm like on my first cast, I caught the biggest fish of my life essentially. And I'm just like, all this hard work on like non-prime, really difficult waters where I live set me up for such great success on the places where it's not as difficult. And I was like, I never thought about that before. They're like, dude, you're crushing it. I'm like, if I had this at home, I'd stop fishing because it's just too easy to catch them here.
Yeah, there you go.
Never thought about it.
That's a good way to, at least that's a positive spin for it. All my struggle is letting me, reap the rewards of the hog I got now.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me about that hunt and fish. What is it? The expo or outdoor
The summit.
Summit? Yeah. The gentleman who put it on just reached out to me. A couple weeks before he put it on and said, "Hey, do you want to come down?" I was like, "I can't make it, but reach around next year." Tell me what about it, and it sounds kind of like a cool deal.
Yeah, so the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit is something that my good friend Derek York thought up. He's kind of seeing there's not really a space in the outdoors podcasting world where they're like getting together with podcasters and industry professionals, hunters and fishermen and women to just discuss conservation and all these different topics. So he kind of saw that niche and he was like, dude, we should put something together. And I do what I can to help him. I'm kind of just like, I work in media by trade. So I manage social media. I do videography. I run and edit podcasts for people. And then obviously I do my own stuff. And I was like, I can help you run all that stuff. And it's just an awesome conference. This is the third year. It's down in Texas. And I mean, there's the names of people that are coming just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We had Ranch Fairy down there this year. I don't know. He was literally just on Meat Eater like today. They released an episode with him on there, and he's really big into like, he's kind of like upsetting the whole archery industry, and he's like really making everyone mad. He's one of those people. What do you call him? They're like a shaker. They come in and they're just like shake everything up.
What's
like,
his what's his take that people don't like?
So his take is that heavier arrows are more lethal to hunt, like when you're hunting like big game, pigs, deer, elk. And the whole bow industry essentially is built around small, fast arrows. So he's basically like flipping the script. And I don't know. It doesn't logically make me understand why it makes people mad, but it's just one of those things. In this world, anything long distance or backpacking, everybody has their like click, like, oh, I'm ultralight. And it's like, who cares? Really, it does what you want.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I'm not. If ultralight makes you happy, go for it. But I'm not going to be shaving my toothbrush off.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not that wimpy. I did the AT with just random crap I had laying around. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah,
I'm a function guy.
Me too. I want to dive into the AT, but to wrap up this outdoor summit. So a bunch of podcasters get together in Texas and shoot the breeze and do some fishing.
We fish. We have a fishing tournament every year. Most of our time is spent podcasting. So everybody that comes, there's guests and there's podcasters, and we just go around and we cycle through. I think I recorded 17 podcasts while I was down there.
Nice. And
we hang out. We have crawfish boils. We eat wild game. We go on pig hunts. It's a great time. And I love it. It's like the favorite part of my year. I don't get that much vacation time, and that's one of the things I go to every single year without doubt. So yeah, it's a great event, and we're trying to grow it. And so if anybody wants to give us money to help it grow and get your name on it, send them my way.
There you go. That's awesome, man. How did you come to the AT, and what was the AT experience like for you?
So I was an idealistic, as I think all of us who have podcasts are, idealistic young guy. And I went to school for cultural anthropology, and I had this big awakening because you study all these ancient cultures and you study all these ways of life that we don't live anymore. We kind of just go through life, and we have, we go to grade school, and then we go to high school, and then we go to college, and then we go to get a job, and then we spend 50 years there or whatever, 30 years at a job, and then we retire and drop dead. And I was like, that doesn't sound cool. And reading a lot of this old like ethnographies and stuff, all these dudes and are talking about these cultures, and they're like, when you turn X age, you got to do this trial by fire. Like Native Americans used to go and sit in the woods with no food or water for like, I don't know, it was like a week or something crazy. Or some African tribes, you have to like kill a lion with a spear. Like there's just crazy rites of passage. And then here they're like, you spend 50 grand, 100 grand on college, and then you spend the rest of your life paying it off. I was like, that sounds like a terrible way to come of age. So I went to college. I did it. The day I graduated, I'm like a very goal-oriented person. So I like skipped all the award ceremonies and just like, I don't care about any of that stuff. Drove down to Georgia. I got dropped off, and my now wife and I did the whole thing. We just hammered through 6 months straight, basically, of just going through, and it was cool, man. I think people need that break because everything's so fast paced nowadays, and life slows down real fast when you get under human power. I mean, you ain't moving that quick. 15 miles a day takes like 12 hours if you're humping a backpack up and down mountains, which it brings you back down to speed real quick.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And did you go north to south, south to north?
South to north in the late season. So we were really stupid and stubborn.
And
it was really cold when we got finished.
Where does it start again? If you're going from
Georgia.
the south? In Georgia, okay.
And Maine, all the way up to Maine. So it's a bit of a trek.
What is there any moment that sticks out to you as like emblematic of the trip, if that makes sense?
Yeah, there's a ton of moments. I think I'll tell you two things from the trail. One of the coolest moments I had was waking up in New Hampshire. There's like this big area called like Pinkham Notch, and it's kind of where you've been on the trail for a really long time, and you're about to get back into a small town. And my then girlfriend, now wife, was having some like foot issues, and it was just a bad day. Like we got into camp late, like past dark. I don't like hiking in the dark. It's just, especially when you're up at high altitudes in the mountains, it's pretty brutal. And then we're coming down this mountain, and she's in a lot of pain, and we're just beat. We get to camp, and we like crash. We set up the tent half-assed. There's bear boxes everywhere, and we're just like, whatever, who cares? We just kind of crashed in our tent. Wake up at about, I don't know, sunrise. Sun starts coming up, and your body just naturally gets in tune with that, and you wake up with the sun and hear this crashing around. And the first thing I think is like, oh shit, there's a bear. We didn't put anything away. We were just like ready to be done. And I popped my head out of the tent, and there is a moose just like 10 feet from where I'm sitting in my tent. And I'm like, I've read a lot of books about what to do if there's bears, but I have no idea what to do if there's a moose. So I just kind of like shook my wife, and I was like, hey, we might die, but there's a moose outside if you want to see it. It's pretty cool. It didn't care that we were there at all. It was just munching on like maple leaves, and it just kind of walked away. I got a picture of it on my cell phone. I was like, if I'm going to die, I'm going to get a cool picture at least so people can see this moose. And like that was like a pure moment for me, because it like summed up all the suckiness and all the coolness of the trail all at the same time.
Hey, it's Will here. I want to take a moment to let you know about our show sponsor and partner, Fischel Paddles, makers of fine, handcrafted wooden canoe paddles. I spent a lot of time paddling rivers and lakes, and Fischel paddles are the best canoe paddles that I've come across. I use the Ray Special model myself, and I outfit all the guided trips that I run with Fischel paddles too, because I think they're the best. Each paddle is handmade by Greg Fischel at his shop in Flagstaff, Arizona, from a single piece of wood. What I love most is the shape and feel of the paddle. Other than being beautiful and efficient, it puts less strain on your shoulders and arms than a typical paddle would, while actually giving you more control and finesse with each stroke. Plus, the shape of the blade just feels right cutting through the water. All paddles are customizable from the type of wood, whether that's cherry, ash, or maple, to laser engravings, and my favorite, which is the leather strap that Greg pins around the shaft so that it doesn't get beat up as you run along the gunnels, prying off or doing the J-stroke in the back of the stern there. So go get yourself a Fischel paddle now and feel the difference. Use the code WILL at checkout. That's WILL to get a free wooden paddle hanger with any paddle purchase. That way you can show off and organize that new handmade paddle. Check them out at FischelPaddles.com. That's FISHELL paddles.com. Fischel Paddles, handcrafted wooden canoe paddles. Hey, it's Will here. Are you looking for an adventurous job? I got just the place for you. Camp Manitouish YMCA up in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, the North Woods of Wisconsin, is looking to hire staff for their summer camp and leadership program and operations. Come have a summer-long wilderness experience working with the youth. Let me tell you, I worked there for 3 years, and awesome place. The North Woods are amazing. It's absolutely beautiful up there. Fresh air, tall pines, and great people. You're going to enjoy it if you go up to Camp Manitouish YMCA in Boulder Junction. Some of the perks of employment include weekly salary, all housing and food provided for the entire summer. They offer leadership training, options for wilderness certifications like Wilderness First Aid, CPR, Wilderness First Responder, and more. They offer opportunities to lead awesome trips with youth in the outdoors. So to find out more, check them out at manito-wish.org. That's manitouish.org, or you can just Google Camp Manitouish YMCA. It doesn't matter how you spell it, still pops up. That's usually what I do. And make sure you tell me you heard about it on Buffalo Roamer Outdoors.
And then people there's so many stories about like murder on the AT, and like people get really freaked out about.
The ladies love those ones, right?
Yeah, they're just like something about women love like serial killers. There's like this whole cult of them. They watch all those shows about serial killers.
It's
and stuff.
strange. Don't make me recount the conversation with my girlfriend.
And there was this one guy. He was really strange. We got to a campsite and we were gonna stay there, and he just wouldn't stop being weird, I guess. Like, we were trying to talk to him, and he kept talking about how he had a gun and he was living out there, and I don't know, his vibes were really screwed up. And he kept talking about how he was gonna like go to Africa and dig wells and save the planet or something. Like, I was like, don't you think? Like, I was trying to have a logical conversation with him, and I was like, don't you think like if that was an option, they would like this? People have already done this already, and he like got super pissed. And I'm like, well, I guess this is a good time to go. So we left. And, you know, there are creepy people out there, but our friends, they're behind us a little bit, on like a few hours behind us. They ended up crashing there, and they told us the next day, who was that psychopath that stayed at our campsite? He wouldn't leave us alone. He was creeping us out. And I was like, well, I wish we could have got a hold of you, because yeah, that's why we left. That's why we didn't stay there. So that's like the good and the bad all in one. I still think people should do it. I mean, you can't be scared of every little situation that arises. I mean, there's weird people, and you go downtown to like go to a bar or something too. It's just
totally
anywhere you're at, there's going to be creeps.
Yep.
So, yeah, the AT was great though.
And it's interesting too. I think that my Mississippi River trip and maybe the Yukon to some extent helped me in this aspect of, you know, you can feel when somebody's got, you know, weird vibes like that, or when they're off, you know, and when you run into all these strangers and you're trying to, you know, let them help you, I guess. And you're trying to have interactions with them and meet new people who you've never met before. It's helpful to be able to, you know, kind of feel those, or have an understanding of people's intentions. I think I'm pretty good at that. And I think maybe some of it came from doing those trips and just like, you know, staying with so many random people.
Yeah. It is weird when you kind of have to put your trust in people that you don't know, because that's not something we really do a lot anymore. Everybody's very guarded. If you can't tell, you like turn on the TV and everybody's freaking out about everything, or social media. And it's like, I don't know. I don't really think it's that bad most of the time. It's mostly just like people like to blow things out of proportion. I was like, I spent a lot of time with people I don't know, and they were totally cool, and they totally treated me totally great. So I don't know. It's a lot. People like to blow things out of proportion. That's for sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
you traveled a lot too, you know.
Yeah, 100%. Isn't it funny too? I don't know if you found this on the AT, but on a lot of the trips, especially the longer ones that I've done, and it's like the locals who you ask, like they might know their little neck of the woods, but if you ask them anything beyond that, it's like worthless information. Like, you know, how far is the next town? They'll be like, oh, it's like 50 miles. And you look in your map and it's like 10 miles or something, you know, it's just like, it's funny.
Yeah. That's why I was saying at the beginning, when it's really interesting to like meet people who have traveled a lot and have a lot of life experience, because the average person does not do stuff like that. And it's hard to remember that. It's hard to like someone like you or I has probably had 10,000 times the life experience of the average person. And we're either insane or we're on the right track. And I have a hard time telling either way. But I mean, I don't know if you've found this, like things just don't seem as big of obstacles anymore. Like things that I used to think were difficult pre-traveling like that and doing all that hard stuff are just like not that big of a deal anymore. It's like, oh, we're trying to build this new platform and it could take 5 years. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it's not that hard. You're just sitting at a computer all day.
Right.
What are you complaining about? Like, go hike 10,000 miles. Like, that's pretty hard. I don't know. I've kind of just like stopped caring that much about dumb shit, I guess.
That's a great way to put it. I agree. I love it. I think that's a great realization, my friend. The other thing that I slight takeaway is that from some of mine is that, you know, all you got to do is get started. It's so cliche, right? But it's true. It's like if you want to hike, you know, across the whole East Coast, all you got to do is show up to Georgia and start walking, you know, and then the next day you walk a little more. And the day after that, you walk a little more. You know, it's not like, it's like if you really want to do this big, crazy goal, which sounds wild, of, you know, through hiking the AT and, you know, walking across America, it's like that sounds a lot more ambitious than like, oh, I'm going to drive to Georgia and, you know, hike for a couple days. But, you know, you just string it together and next thing you know, you're at the end of the trail, right?
Well, and it's exactly it too. And you can't take those things as one big chunk. Like if you're canoeing through the Yukon, and if you're focusing on the last day, I don't know how long a trip like that takes, but like if all you focus on is the last day, you're going to drive yourself crazy because it's going to seem overwhelming. And it's like I spent every day thinking about tonight. Like I want to get to this point, and you just keep doing that over and over, and you're done. And I think people have a hard time because there's such easy fixations nowadays. You can get such easy gratification through like social media or just anything really. You just go to the store or buy drugs or whatever you do ever. And it's like you get this instant gratification, but out there you're like, it's not the same. You're really have to like push for your goals and stuff like that. And just mindset is really like hard to find nowadays. And I don't know. It's something you have to cultivate over time too. Like it's easy to, I wouldn't say a through hike's easy, but it's literally just a lot of days of stringing together hikes.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, I feel like people either go one of two ways when they do stuff like this, is they become egomaniacs and they think they're like God's gift to the earth, or they really just mellow out. And I like to think that I've mellowed out.
I think it seems like it. I didn't know you before, but you seem pretty mellow, Paul.
Well, it's like I don't know if you found this, like, especially, I don't know, I just know the backpacking world. I don't really know the canoeing and kayaking world very well, but the backpacking world to me has become like this pretentious, just like, I don't know, it's very strange to me. It's
totally,
like,
man.
I'm a hard ass because I hiked this trail, and I'm like, I like to take the pretentiousness out if I can. I'm like, dude, you're like bragging about walking.
I know.
It's like you walked. It's like you're not, yes, you walked far, but like you've been walking since you were born. It's just like, a very condensed walking period.
Yep.
It's obviously
Yeah, I completely agree wholeheartedly. It's like, it's almost like there's two riffs going. It's like you do have the folks like us, and I have a lot of other colleagues, I suppose, podcast friends who it's just like authentic and straightforward. Like my buddy Jeff Lund, he does a Mediocre Alaskan podcast, and the title of the podcast is kind of like what we're saying. It's like, hey, we're not trying to be the LeBron James of mountain climbing, or I don't need a full feature film about me. Like, I think it's a lot of the social media thing too, is that like rather than just going out and enjoying it, you want to tell everybody about it. Now there's an opportunity to monetize it and get money. So if you up your story or fluff your story even more, make it even more dramatic, you get even more eyeballs. And at least I'm glad that I think there's folks like you and I and you listening that like see through that BS, and it's just corny, I think.
Yeah. Well, and that's a thing too. And I have to be careful what I say, but like, I've met some of those people that you see on the social media stuff, and it's like, you're not that person that you are on social media. It's total charade. And I've also kind of found that the more genuine the person is, the more people talk shit on their social media because they're saying things that they don't want to hear. And that's usually a good guiding light for me. Like, oh, everyone hates this guy. He's probably telling the truth.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. Definitely on a larger scale, but yeah, it's funny. And it's a whole deal. But it's good that there are people just telling it authentically too. And I think at the end, there's something about being able to connect with somebody who is not bullshitting and just shooting it straight, trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
What's your what's your hunting passion? What keeps you up? What are you always thinking about? What do you like to do as far as the hunting world?
I have a problem. I have a severe problem. I like all of it, and that is to my own detriment. I've really fallen in love with waterfowl. I mean, where I live in Northwest Ohio, we're right on the marshes of Lake Erie. They're like world-renowned marshes for duck hunting, and kind of got into it this past season, 2022, 2023. That was my first waterfowl hunting experience. So I don't know, it comes in waves. I really enjoyed upland hunting.
How did you get into waterfowl hunting, coming from the backpacking background? Obviously that was some time ago now, but yeah, how did you get into it in your first season?
So during the Appalachian Trail, pre the Appalachian Trail, I guess I should say, there was this book about Eustace Conway. It's called The Last American Man. And it just really hit home to me. I mean, he's not like a very well-balanced person. So like, you have to be careful reading that book, not to take all of his life or some of the life advice in there too seriously. Lots of flawed character traits in there. But he really kind of embodied the whole myth behind the AT, where people are like, are you going to hunt your own food? And are you going to bring a gun? And all that stuff that are like the common questions. And he really did hike the AT, and he like killed a bunch of food and he ate, and he was like dumpster diving. He didn't have a backpack, nothing. He just like lived in the wilderness.
When was this?
And this was like decades ago. He's probably pushing like 65, 70 now.
But we're not talking,
he's been on a bunch.
But we're not talking like revolutionary times, like it's modern times.
Yeah, he's still alive. He's been on a bunch of those like mountain man shows and stuff.
Okay.
Just like search Eustace Conway. He's like a hilarious, crazy mountain man. Cool. I think he lives in North Carolina. But anyway, he talked about how the first time he hunted and killed an animal, it was like this whole life-changing experience. And I was like, after I do the AT, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try hunting. And if I don't like it, I'm never going to do it again. And if I do like it, it's probably going to become an obsession. So pretty much the year I got home, I had a buddy. took a temporary job at a park district doing like canoeing and kayaking and helping with kids camps and stuff. And my buddy Bill, I was like, dude, I don't know anybody that hunts. Like, what, do you know anybody? He's like, well, I haven't hunted in like 15 years. I'd like to like get back into it. And I was like, well, my father-in-law has this farm property. Like, we can hunt there, I think. Like, just, will you show me how to hunt? And we literally went out there and sat. And on my second day of hunting ever, I shot a deer. And dude, I've been in love ever since. And
Wow.
then it just kind of went down that rabbit hole. I really am into bow hunting now. I'm just more comfortable with a bow than a gun, and I don't know why. Logically, it makes no sense. It's easy for me to go outside like and just shoot my bow.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't take a lot. I don't have to go to a range and do all this like scopes and stuff. So I got into bow hunting, and then through the podcast, you know how you just meet people and you get invited to do stuff? Like, that's how it works. And I had a friend from Michigan United Conservation Clubs. Like, they came on the podcast randomly. One day I wake up and I check Facebook, and he's like, hey, we have this hunting camp we run every year. Do you want to come up and hang out? He's like, we're going to upland hunt. I'm like, cool. Yeah, that sounds fun. And we go and shoot woodcock, which was super fun. Upland hunting is really cool. And he's a big duck hunter. So he's like, hey, you want to get up early tomorrow and try duck hunting? And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but yes, I will. It was cold. It was miserable. It was, I couldn't feel my hands or my feet. We're in the island in the middle of the Manistee River in the middle of fall. And I shot my first bird. It was a merganser. And I was like, this is it. And then I went to a backcountry hunters and anglers event here locally in the Toledo area. Met a guy, his name's Chad. He's a big duck hunter. He's like, I don't know anybody else that will duck hunt with me. So I ended up being like the duck hunting guy with him.
Sweet.
And we spent pretty much every Thursday morning through the entirety of duck season at 4 a.m. in a duck blind in the middle of the marshes of Lake Erie trying to hunt ducks. And it's been amazing. And I'm hooked. I absolutely love it.
That's awesome, man. I love it. That's really cool. What do you love about the duck hunting in particular? Because for me, that's just something that I've done. I've done duck, goose, and pheasant, all of that a fair amount, but I've never done the big game. I want to go deer hunting, but haven't. What do you love about duck hunting? I think like the water aspect for me is something that I just love because I'm a water guy, but curious for you.
I've always loved the water. I'm like not a great swimmer. Like, I can swim, but I'm not like a proficient swimmer, but I love the water. Like, you give me a kayak and a bass rod and just let me go, I will be gone all day.
Yep.
So it's just basically like air fishing. I love fishing more than anything. Like, fishing, I say it all the time, I love fishing more than hunting. It's just so much more calming, and it's a lot less stressful, and you don't have to get up at 3 a.m. And I don't know, it's like fishing but in the sky, and it's great. You get to be out there at sunrise, and you get to just watch the world come to life. And the water is just cool. I don't know. It's just something about being on the water in any aspect that's just awesome.
I
and that's why I think you'll find too, when you start getting into deer hunting, that you'll still like waterfowl hunting more, because deer hunting can be really, really exciting or really, 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 really boring.
Yeah, thinking about the way you said that the duck hunting was kind of like fishing, it is kind of like that. You know, you're just kind of sitting around with the buddies, shooting the breeze, and then all of a sudden, like, shit starts happening. You know, you see a flock coming in, you're like, oh, let's go, getting a bite.
Yeah, and then you blame whoever, when the ducks fly away, you blame one of the other guys. You looked up, they saw your eyes. That's the best part. Talking smack. I love it.
Gotta love it. That's funny, man. What else? What are the marshes of Lake Erie like? I have in my mind an image, but how would you describe it? It sounds really neat and kind of like a different type of wilderness that not many people probably experience.
Yeah, it's down south. A lot of the guys, when you talk, like, watch YouTube videos and stuff, they're always talking about hunting timber and flooded cornfields, and I'm like, that sounds super cool, but that's not what it's like up here. So It's very strange. There's some really good conservation organizations and state agencies that have really gone out of their way to preserve these marshes. And they're almost like a museum at this point because they're walled off from Lake Erie, and they have canals that they have like basically, I don't know what they're called, like dams that they can open and close to allow water in and out, because just like from an environmental standpoint, I mean, look around, everything's super screwed up. So they're preserving these marshes, and these are like a huge flyway for not only ducks and waterfowl, but I mean, even coming up here in May, these marshes will have this big bird migrations come through because they fly up the rivers and the Maumee River, and they use these waterways, corridors of the Great Lakes to migrate north. And the marshes are an experience. You have to have some sort of kayak or boat to get in there, and they're depends on how much water's in them, but they're essentially a big deep channel where you dump your boat in, and then it kind of you turn down these almost roads in the marsh. They have signs and signage, and you follow these to your blind. You have to reserve a blind for the day. You have to get up at like early or really late at night. They have a time where you can reserve a spot, and you can get 3 people to go in. And it's a lot of walking through waist deep water, big tall reeds on either side of you, and you go up into this blind, you set up your decoys, and it's just kind of like real shallow water for a very long distance. And there's these pools in the like where your blind's set up, with the reeds are surrounding them, and then the hope is ducks come into these pools. And it's just a weird experience. For me, it's normal because that's the only way that I've ever hunted ducks. I'd like to experience hunting ducks in like timber or something. I think that would just be really cool. And that's what I think. I'm like, man, hunting ducks in timber, that sounds crazy. What would that be like? So
yeah, it sounds
it's
neat.
a cool experience.
Yeah, it sounds cool. It sounds cool. What do you have any interesting or is there a wildlife story that comes to the forefront? If I were to say, like, obviously you spent a lot of time in the woods hunting, fishing, hiking. Any wildlife encounters that jump out to you, or cool or interesting wildlife that you've seen in the woods?
I've seen a lot of cool wildlife. I don't know. I've always just been fascinated by moose. I have a few run-ins with black bears, but I don't know. I feel like people blow that out of proportion. Like, yes, they can be dangerous, but they're like all at basically campgrounds. I've run into in northern Michigan. I've been camping by myself solo in a hammock, and I woke up and I heard this huffing, and this bear was just like right outside my hammock. Ooh. Scared the shit out of me. I mean, seriously. Like I wasn't scared, but I was like, as you just wake up and there's a bear outside your tent or your hammock, and you're like, oh boy, this is interesting. And then probably the most scared I've ever been with wildlife was another moose encounter. We were in Maine. It was like the final stretch of the Appalachian Trail. I mean, we probably had like 100 or 200 miles left. So you're pretty confident at this point in hiking. So you're going up these high altitude mountain peaks and really tight forest. Like, it's small, basically like pine trees, but they're very like tight. So the trail is very, I don't know, it almost feels like you're claustrophobic in there sometimes.
Sure.
And we come around this corner, kind of opens up for a second, and I turn a hard left, and I literally almost run into this moose. Like, and people see moose on TV and they're like, yeah, they're pretty big. But I mean, when it's like shoulder is at like my eye level, you like I don't know if anybody's ever stood next to a Clydesdale at like a fair or something, like the big horse. It's bigger than that, and you're like,
they're massive.
Yeah, and I'm 6'1", and like I'm staring at this thing's shoulder, and I'm like, whoa, that's a big animal. And that wasn't scary in and of itself. It was a female moose, but she had a baby right next to her, and I was like, shit, this could be bad real fast. So we basically like turned around and hightailed it out and kind of cut down through the woods out of her line of sight and back onto the trail. That was probably the scariest I've ever been on the trail. I mean, I've seen bobcats in the wilderness. I've seen a ton of stuff. out there, you know, tons of like cool birds, owls, woodpeckers. I don't know. I think that was my most scary wildlife encounter ever.
Yeah, especially
a fox like chasing stuff. It's
nice.
Cool.
One time in the when I was on the Yukon River, this was in the flats section near in interior Alaska, and we were camping on this little island, and the river's massive at this point. It's kind of like the Ohio. It's probably like a mile and a half wide, just like a big, wide rolling river. And the current is always deceptive, you know, because it doesn't look like you're going that fast until you like throw a stick in or until you get off, and you realize like that current's whipping. And we were stopped at an island. I don't remember. I think we camped and we woke up in the morning, and it's like a small island. It's probably like 100, 200 yards. And sure enough, there is like this big, like I guess like a cow moose, and hanging out on the island. And we were like, what are you doing all the way out here? And once we came up and, you know, started making noise and stuff, packing up tent and getting breakfast going, the moose, we watched it like jump into the water and swim across this like 1.5 mile channel, man. And we were watching it like, what are you doing? What are you doing, little buddy? And he gets in the river and just starts like whipping downstream. You know, he's facing upstream like doggy paddling, and we watch him, and he makes it like we see him like making progress, but like by the time he was like a tiny little dot, like we couldn't even see him. He was like 3/4 of the way across. We were like, wow, that was wild, dude. Just moose swimming, getting after it.
Moose can swim, deer can swim. It's weird. That's like how they end up on all those weird little islands. I've seen deer on islands before. I'm like, how the hell did you get out here?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
That's one of the things that I want to do as far as deer hunting is I want to hop out to some of these islands on the Mississippi that just see no people or no traffic. I'm sure there's just monsters out there, and take the canoe out and just, you know, find them out there.
I've been putting a plan together here to do that as well on where I live, but I think they get a little more play, the islands where I live, because people think the same thing, and then they go out there and I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it pans out. I'm not quite sure yet.
Yeah. So what are you looking forward to coming up? Any hunting, any trips, any outdoor dreaming?
Yeah. Well, there's always a lot of all of those things that I'd like to do. I'm really excited for bass fishing this summer. I got some really, really good advice from some really, really talented fishermen at the podcast summit this year, and I'm going to try and put that into play, which will be very frustrating. They said, basically, if I can distill the advice down, they said, if you want to catch big bass, you're not going to get a lot of bites.
Right.
And that's never a fun day when you're out fishing and spending, 8 hours on the water. And one of the guys was telling me, he's like, yeah, I had a mission to catch a 10-pound bass, and I went out day after day after day, and every day I'd get 2 bites, and that was it. And he's like, I know this is the fish, and I know this sucks, but he finally caught a 10-pound bass, and he's like, it's going to be frustrating. I was like, all right, one summer. We get one summer to catch one of these big boys, to dedicate that time, and then it's back to just numbers game.
Sick, man. I like that goal. I can support that. Hunting for the big boy.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm not excited for how much effort it's going to take, but I'm excited for the thrill of the chase. And then hopefully, I don't know if it's going to pan out or not, but I might be able to swing down to Texas and do some coastal fishing with my friend Derek. He's a charter captain, and help him with some video work, photography for him. And last year I went down there and I caught a black tip shark, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done. That was a brutal fight with a
really?
fish. And
how so?
Do that. It would be like, imagine strapping like 150-pound dumbbell to the fishing pole and just sinking it to the bottom of the ocean and just trying to like all your power to pull it back up to the boat.
Dude,
and then it runs away and you have to start all over again.
You don't have to sell me, man. You don't have to sell me. Sign me up. Let's go,
man. I'm telling you. Yeah, it's awesome. That
reminds me, actually, I did a fishing trip to Brazil. Actually, the Amazon River. It was wild. Sweet. This was a couple, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and the crew I was with was a bunch of older gentlemen, older guys, and one of the species we were targeting, or you could target, was these Amazon catfish. Parabi catfish is one of the names of them, and these things get massive, man. And so this guy, Phil, hooked into one the day before I was fishing for him, and he, like, we all stopped for lunch and kind of met up, and he was telling me, he was like, whoo, he was like, Will, I'll tell you what, he was like, that thing kicked my ass. Like, I don't think I could go back for another one. Like, he was like, that thing really was put a beating on me. And I was thinking in the back of my head, I was like, man, this old man, like, come on, like, let me take it for a rip. Like, I want to catch one of those big boys. And the next day I hooked into two of them. I lost a massive one, and I landed like 150-pound catfish. And after that fight, dude, I remember thinking, like, I can't believe I was giving Phil a hard time. I'm like 50 years his younger, and I'm like, like completely wiped,
Yeah, I made a video of that fishing trip that I went with last year. And in the video, I'm like, I always thought these fishermen were full of shit out here on these boats, like acting all dramatic. I was like, it really is that hard. It sucks.
Yeah, dude, it's no joke when you get one of them big things on the line that doesn't want to be brought in,
Yeah, it's fun. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Paul, we'll wind her down a little bit here. Where can we find your podcast, and who have been some of the folks that you've enjoyed speaking with on the podcast recently?
Cool. Yeah, you can find the podcast Aptitude Outdoors. It's a video podcast, so you can get it on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Aptitude Outdoors Podcast. I also have a separate YouTube channel where I'm putting out like mini documentaries and stuff. So they're separate. I know that's super confusing, but the way YouTube's set up, I didn't really have a choice. And it's on everything. It's on all the usual podcatchers, anywhere you can find that. I have a website, but I don't really update it. I'm working to redo it right now, so I would not go over there. Maybe if you listen to this in like 2 years, maybe it's a good time. And then all your social medias, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that crap. So that's where you can find me. Recent guests, man, I love talking to all my guests, but I think some of the most recent ones would be like the Ranch Fairy I was talking about earlier. His podcast is really interesting. I talked to a lot of wildlife professionals and like new hunters. And I talked to the guy who's like the head of policy for Pheasants Forever. His was a really interesting, because I had a hard time wrapping my head around pheasant hunting, because they're like non-native species. And he really changed my mind on that. And what else? Pretty much anything. Yeah.
I listen. I've only listened to one episode, and I think it was today or yesterday, but the one with the guy who did Unbranded and what's the Texas film called?
Oh, Deep in the Heart.
Deep
Ben
in the
Masters.
Heart. Yeah. That one I really enjoyed.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a great filmmaker. He is definitely worth listening to on that podcast, and definitely worth watching those films. Another guy, you can tell he's genuine, because when that film came out, he was like getting death threats and stuff, and I'm like, yep, this is my guy. He likes stirring shit up. So no, that's a great film. People get really controversial about he got death threats about telling people that he thinks there should be like a law on a limit regulation on cougars in Texas. Because there's no, like, people can just kill them almost like they're coyotes, I guess. I don't know if I'm screwing the terms up, but like people were mad. They like I guess he had to go in like protection and stuff. Like people were threatening him and his family. It's wild. So yeah, it's a wild story. But all of his films are crazy. Yeah. So,
and what's his name on your episode if people want to go check it out? Because I enjoyed listening to that one.
Ben Masters, that's a really good episode. Yeah, it's
cool.
You record enough episodes, you just kind of like, I don't know, I'm like 120. It's hard to remember.
I know what you mean. How often are you dropping episodes?
Right now, I am putting out an episode every Thursday with a guest, and then on every Sunday, I try and do like a educational something, like teaching, or like last Sunday, I put out a duck calling tutorial for my friend Andrew, who works for Sure Shot Game Calls. I just want to teach people who are just getting into hunting and fishing, like the basics, because a lot of people, I don't know, I found going through this process on YouTube and trying to watch hundreds of tutorials. It's like, I'm tired of people selling me shit and getting like 50 minutes of ads before I start. Like, I want to know how to do it, and I want to know how to do it effectively, quickly. I don't want a 45-minute tutorial. I want something. So I try and cut those episodes down to as short as possible, like 10, 15 minutes. I don't know how sustainable that's going to be because I keep getting busier with work and stuff. And other than that, me and my friend Seth just put out a documentary about hunting. It's called The Hunt Within. We're going to start putting it into some film festivals and stuff. So keep your eye out for that too. It's not going to be released to the public immediately, but we are putting that out there to get some reviews and stuff first before probably end up on like Vimeo or something. I don't really know how this documentary process works. So if anybody listening does, hit me up because I'm very confused looking for help. So
Great. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. And any parting thoughts here?
Just go do stuff. Don't worry about what other people think. A prime example would be, I just went fly fishing for the first time 2 weeks ago, and I was really nervous about it because when you talk about fly fishing, it's very much a pretentious kind of vibe going on with a lot of people.
Yep.
And I was like, man, I've been doing this outdoors podcast for 3, almost 4 years now. I don't want to go out there and look like an idiot. It was fun. So just like with anything, just like you said earlier, you take that leap off to the scary part, and then then it's not that bad. Once you've taken the jump, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So don't be too intimidated. And if you do need help, don't be afraid to ask. I ask people for help all the time, man.
Amen. It's the only way to get
That's
better,
my
right?
advice. Amen to that.
Hey, all right. Paul, appreciate your time, man. Take it easy.
Yes. Thank you.
And there you have it, episode 67 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors with Paul Fuzinski. If you want to go listen to Paul on his podcast, that's called Aptitude Outdoors is the name of his show. Big shout out to Fischel Canoe Paddles, makers of fine handcrafted wooden canoe paddles. Use the code WILL at checkout to get yourself a free paddle hanger with purchase of a new Fischel paddle. That's FischelPaddles.com, Fishell. Big thank you to Camp Manitouish YMCA up in beautiful Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, a 3-week summer sleepaway camp based around wilderness experiences and teaching children leadership skills. That's Camp Manitouish YMCA. Also, go check out BuffaloRoamer.com. That's my website. I got different guided trips up there. I have journal entries from some of my different expeditions, past trip info, all kinds of cool stuff. Also, follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Buffalo Roamer. Other than that, go get yourself some fresh air. We'll talk soon.